My name is George. I'm 69 years old, and last month, my own son-in-law changed the locks on my house, the same house I built with my bare hands. When I tried to go inside, he looked me in the eye and said, "It's ours now." He expected me to cry. Instead, I smiled, because I had a plan that would destroy everything he built his greed on. You know what hurts the most? It's not the betrayal itself. It's the moment you realize that the people you love most in this world have been planning your destruction while you were making them breakfast. While you were fixing their broken faucets. While you were babysitting their children and telling them bedtime stories about a grandfather who would always protect them. Before I tell you how I turned the tables, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about a house. This isn't just about money or property lines or legal documents. This is about watching your own flesh and blood look you in the eye and decide you're disposable. This is about the moment you realize that the daughter you raised, the little girl who used to crawl into your bed during thunderstorms, has chosen a man over the father who gave her everything. They thought I was old and weak. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Let me take you back to that day. October 15th. I remember it because it was exactly 3 months after my wife's death anniversary, and I'd been visiting my brother in Phoenix to clear my head. The grief was still eating me alive, you understand. 43 years of marriage, and suddenly I'm sleeping in a bed that feels like an ocean of emptiness. My brother thought the desert air might help. Thought maybe getting away from all the memories in that house might give me some peace. What a joke that turned out to be. I drove back home on a Tuesday evening. The October air was crisp, the kind that makes you think about fireplaces and warm dinners and family gatherings. I was actually looking forward to being home. Maybe calling Lisa, seeing if she wanted to bring the grandkids over for dinner. Maybe we could carve pumpkins like we used to when she was little. But when I pulled into my driveway, something felt wrong. The lights were on in the living room, but they were different lights. Brighter. Harsher. Not the warm yellow glow of the old lamps my wife had picked out at that antique shop in town. And there were voices. Laughter. The kind of loud, careless laughter that comes from people who feel completely at home. I walked up to my front door, the door I'd painted blue because my wife said it reminded her of the ocean, and I put my key in the lock. It didn't turn. I tried again, thinking maybe the lock was just sticky. I'd been meaning to oil it for months. But no. The key didn't fit. Not even close. My hand started shaking. Not from the cold. From something much worse. From the slow, creeping realization that something terrible was happening. I knocked on my own door. Can you imagine that? Knocking on the door of the house you built with your own hands, the house where you raised your daughter, the house where you held your wife's hand as she took her last breath. Footsteps approached from inside. Heavy footsteps. Male footsteps. And then the door opened, and there was Mark. My son-in-law. Standing in my doorway like he owned the place. He wasn't surprised to see me. That's what I remember most clearly. He wasn't surprised at all. He was calm. Prepared. Like he'd been rehearsing this moment. "George," he said, and his voice was different. Colder. Not the warm, respectful tone he'd used for the past 5 years. "This isn't your home anymore. We've taken care of everything." Behind him, in the shadows of my own hallway, I could see Lisa. My daughter. My little girl. She was there, but she wouldn't look at me. She stood there like a ghost, her eyes fixed on the floor, her hands twisted together in front of her. "What do you mean?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Part of me had been dreading this moment for months, ever since I'd started noticing the small changes. The way Mark looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. The way Lisa had started avoiding my calls. "The house is ours now," Mark said, and there was something in his voice. Not just coldness. Satisfaction. Like he was enjoying this. Like he'd been waiting for this moment. Lisa and I are the legal owners. We have all the paperwork. And then he did something that will haunt me until the day I die. He smiled. Not a kind smile. Not an apologetic smile. A triumphant smile. The smile of a man who had just won a game I didn't even know we were playing. But this is my house, I said, and I heard my own voice crack like I was 13 years old again. I built this house. Every brick, every board, every... Not anymore, Mark interrupted. And then he stepped back and slowly, deliberately, closed the door in my face. I stood there on my own porch, holding a key that no longer fit my own door, listening to voices and laughter from inside my own home. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might stop. My vision was getting blurry around the edges. For a moment, I thought I might be having a heart attack. But it wasn't a heart attack. It was something worse. It was the moment when everything you thought you knew about your life crumbles into dust. I tried calling Lisa. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried calling again. Same thing. I sat in my truck in my own driveway and called my daughter 17 times. 17 times I heard her voice saying, "Hi, you've reached Lisa. Leave a message." 17 times I hung up without saying a word because what do you say? What do you say when your own child locks you out of the home you built for her? That was the moment I realized, I hadn't lost my home. I'd lost my family. But let me back up. Let me tell you how I got here. Because this didn't happen overnight. This was years in the making, and I was too blind, too trusting, too much of a damn fool to see it coming. 40 years. 40 years I spent working construction, breaking my back so my family could have a good life. My hands are permanently stained with concrete dust and motor oil. My knees creak when I walk because of all the years I spent kneeling on job sites, laying foundations for other people's dreams while I saved every penny for my own. When my wife Sarah was diagnosed with cancer, I knew I had to build us something permanent. Something that would last. Something that would be ours forever, no matter what happened. The doctors said she might have 2 years. Maybe 3 if we were lucky. I found a piece of land on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy. Just 2 acres with some old oak trees and a view of the hills. But it was ours. I bought it with the money I'd been saving for a fishing boat, because suddenly a fishing boat seemed like the most ridiculous thing in the world when your wife is dying and you don't even own the roof over her head. I designed the house myself. Drew up the plans on graph paper at the kitchen table while Sarah slept. A simple 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch because Sarah always wanted a porch where she could drink her coffee and watch the sunrise. For bedrooms because we still hoped for more children back then. A fireplace in the living room because Sarah said a house wasn't a home without a fireplace. I built that house with my bare hands. I dug the foundation. I poured the concrete. I framed every wall and installed every window. When I couldn't afford to hire help, I worked alone. When I couldn't afford materials, I bought them secondhand and fixed them up. Lisa was just 5 years old then, and she would come to the job site after school and hand me nails while I worked. "Daddy, is this going to be our house forever?" she would ask, and I would tell her yes. Forever and always. This would be our home, and nothing would ever take it away from us. It took me 3 years to finish that house. 3 years of 16-hour days and aching muscles and splinters in my fingers. But when it was done, when we finally moved in and Sarah hung her curtains in the kitchen window, I felt like I had accomplished something real. Something permanent. Something that would outlast all of us. Sarah lived for 8 more years in that house. 8 beautiful, precious, heartbreaking years. She saw Lisa graduate from high school in our living room because by then she was too weak to travel. She taught Lisa how to make her grandmother's apple pie in our kitchen. She died in our bedroom, holding my hand and looking out the window at the oak trees we used to sit under when we were young. After Sarah died, that house became everything to me. It wasn't just where I lived. It was where she lived. It was where every good memory of our life together was stored. Every floorboard, every doorway, every window held pieces of her. Lisa understood that. Or at least, I thought she did. After the funeral, she would come over twice a week to check on me. We would sit on the porch Sarah loved so much, and she would tell me about her job, her friends, her dreams. She was working as a nurse then, saving lives and making her mother proud. She was 26 years old and beautiful and kind, and I thought I had done something right as a father. And then she met Mark. I remember the first time she brought him over. It was a Sunday in September, and I was raking leaves in the front yard. They pulled up in his car, a shiny black sedan that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. Mark stepped out wearing a perfectly pressed shirt and shoes that had never seen a day of real work. But he was charming. I'll give him that. He walked right up to me with a big smile and a firm handshake and said, "Mr. Henderson, I've heard so much about you. Lisa tells me you built this beautiful house yourself." He seemed genuinely impressed as I showed him around. He asked good questions about the construction, complimented the craftsmanship, even helped me fix a loose board on the porch without being asked. Lisa was glowing, hanging on his every word, and I could see how much she cared about him. This is a man who knows how to work, I thought. This is a man who respects what I've built. How wrong I was. For the first year, Mark was everything I could have wanted in a son-in-law. He was attentive to Lisa, respectful to me, and helpful around the house. When my water heater broke, he insisted on helping me install the new one. When I mentioned needing to repaint the shutters, he showed up the next weekend with brushes and rollers. He started calling me Dad after they got engaged. Not Mr. Henderson or George, but Dad. The first time he said it, I almost cried. I'd been so lonely since Sarah died, and having a son, even a son-in-law, felt like a gift. But looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The way he would walk through my house like he was measuring it. The way he would ask questions about my finances, my health, my plans for the future. The way he would suggest improvements that always seemed to involve spending my money. "Dad, you should really modernize this place," he would say. "Update the kitchen, maybe add a deck out back. I know some contractors who could give you a great deal." I thought he was just trying to help. I thought he cared about making the house better for all of us. I didn't realize he was planning to live there himself. The red flags started appearing about 6 months before the wedding. Little things at first. My checkbook went missing for a week, then mysteriously reappeared in a different drawer. Bills started arriving late even though I always paid them early. My property tax notice was returned to the county as undeliverable, even though I'd lived at the same address for 15 years. When I mentioned these things to Lisa, she had explanations for everything. "Maybe you just forgot where you put the checkbook, Dad. You've been under a lot of stress lately. The post office has been having problems with our route. Mark and I have been missing mail too." Mark was always quick to offer solutions. "Let me help you set up online banking, Dad. It's so much easier than writing checks. I can handle your mail for a while if you want. Lisa and I check our box every day anyway." I was grateful for the help. I was grateful to have someone young and smart looking out for me. I didn't realize I was being slowly, methodically separated from control of my own life. The wedding was beautiful. Sarah would have loved it. Lisa wore her mother's dress, and Mark cried when she walked down the aisle. They had the reception in our backyard, under the oak trees where Sarah and I used to sit. I gave a speech about how proud I was to welcome Mark into our family, how happy I was that Lisa had found someone who would love and protect her the way she deserved. Mark gave a speech too. He talked about family and commitment and promises that last forever. He looked right at me when he said, "George isn't just gaining a son-in-law. I'm gaining a father. And I promise to take care of both Lisa and George for the rest of my life." Everyone applauded. I had tears in my eyes. I thought I was the luckiest man alive. The changes started slowly after the wedding. Mark and Lisa moved into a rental house across town, but they spent more and more time at my place. At first, I was thrilled. I loved having them around. The house felt alive again with their voices and laughter. But then Mark started making suggestions about efficiency. "Dad, you don't need to heat the whole house when you're here alone. Why don't you move your bedroom downstairs to save on heating bills? Dad, some of this old furniture is taking up so much space. Why don't we donate it and get you something more modern?" Piece by piece, my house started changing. The recliner where I used to sit and read the paper disappeared one day. "It was falling apart, Dad. We got you a new one." The antique dining table Sarah had inherited from her grandmother was replaced with something sleek and contemporary. "This one seats more people, Dad. Much better for family dinners." But the worst part was watching Lisa change. My sweet, caring daughter who used to call me every day started calling once a week, then once every 2 weeks. When she did visit, she seemed distant. Distracted. Like she was going through the motions of being my daughter but her heart wasn't in it anymore. "Lisa, is everything okay?" I would ask. "You seem different lately." "I'm fine, Dad. Just busy with work and getting used to married life." Mark thinks. I think maybe you worry about me too much." Mark thinks. Those 2 words started appearing in all of Lisa's sentences. Mark thinks I should update my will. Mark thinks I should consider assisted living. Mark thinks I'm getting too old to maintain such a big house by myself. When did my daughter stop thinking for herself? When did Mark's voice become the only one she heard? The breaking point came 6 months ago, on my 69th birthday. I had hoped for a quiet celebration. Maybe dinner with Lisa and Mark, maybe a homemade cake like Sarah used to make me. Instead, Mark surprised me with a gift. "Dad, Lisa and I have been talking, and we think it's time you had some help managing your affairs," he said, pulling out a stack of legal documents. "We've arranged for Lisa to have power of attorney. That way, if anything happens to you, she can take care of everything without any legal hassles." The papers were already prepared. All I had to do was sign. "This is just a precaution, Dad," Lisa said, but she wouldn't look me in the eye. "We want to make sure you're protected." Protected? From what? From whom? I was healthy, mentally sharp, perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. But they made it sound like I was being irresponsible by not signing. Like I was being selfish by wanting to maintain control of my own life. "What's the rush?" I asked. "Let me read through these first." Mark's smile faltered for just a moment. "Of course, Dad. Take all the time you need. But really, it's just standard stuff. Ask any lawyer, they'll tell you every family should have these arrangements in place." I didn't sign that night. Something in my gut told me to wait, to think, to maybe get my own lawyer to look at the documents first. But I made the mistake of leaving them on my kitchen table. When I came back from grocery shopping the next day, the papers were gone. "Oh, Lisa took them," Mark said when I called. "She wanted to make some corrections before you sign. Nothing major, just some minor details about the wording." I never saw those papers again. But a week later, I got a call from my bank. There had been some irregularities with my account. Someone had been making electronic transfers that didn't match my usual patterns. Did I authorize a payment to Henderson Property Management LLC? I had never heard of Henderson Property Management LLC. But when I investigated, I discovered it was a company owned by Mark and Lisa. They had been transferring my money into their account, small amounts at first, then larger ones. Utility payments, property taxes, insurance premiums, all going through their company instead of being paid directly. When I confronted them, Mark had an explanation ready. "Dad, we set this up to help you manage your expenses more efficiently. Everything gets paid on time, and you don't have to worry about keeping track of all those different bills." "But I never authorized this," I said. "You did, Dad," Lisa said quietly. "Remember? You signed some papers last month. We explained it all to you then." Had I? I tried to remember, but there had been so many papers lately. So many signatures for so many different things. Mark was always bringing me documents to sign, insurance updates, bank forms, medical authorizations. Was it possible I had signed something without understanding what it was? The doubt was poisonous. Maybe I was getting confused. Maybe I was losing track of things. Maybe they really were just trying to help, and I was being paranoid and ungrateful. That's how they did it. Not with one big theft, but with 1,000 small cuts. A signature here, a transferred document there, a utility bill redirected, a bank account modified. Death by 1,000 paper cuts until suddenly I wasn't the owner of my own life anymore. The house started feeling different. Mark and Lisa had keys, of course, they were family. But they started using them more and more often. I would come home from the grocery store to find them in my kitchen, going through my mail. I would wake up in the morning to find Mark in my home office, organizing my paperwork. "We're just trying to help you stay organized, Dad," Lisa would say. But why did it feel like an invasion? Why did it feel like they were studying my life, learning my patterns, mapping out my weaknesses? The photographs started disappearing next. Not all at once, but gradually. The wedding picture of Sarah and me that sat on the mantelpiece. The family portraits that lined the hallway. The candid shots of Lisa as a child that I kept on my nightstand. They were getting faded, Dad, Mark explained. We had them digitally restored. They'll be back soon. They never came back. Instead, the walls filled up with new pictures. Mark and Lisa's wedding photos. Pictures of them on vacation. Professional portraits of them looking happy and successful and young. It was like they were erasing Sarah and me from our own home. Like they were rewriting history to make it look like this had always been their house, their life, their story. The final straw came 3 months ago. I had gone to visit my brother in Phoenix because the isolation was killing me. The house felt foreign now, filled with their things and their energy and their plans for a future that didn't include me. I needed to get away, to clear my head, to figure out what to do. I was gone for 2 weeks. When I came back, everything had changed. The front door had a new lock. A digital lock with a keypad instead of the simple deadbolt I'd installed 20 years ago. There were new security cameras mounted under the eaves. The mailbox had been replaced with something modern and streamlined. And when I tried to use my key, it didn't fit. I stood on my own porch, fumbling with a key that no longer worked, feeling like a stranger in the place I had built with my own hands. The humiliation was crushing. The betrayal was worse. Mark opened the door wearing the expression of a man who had been expecting this moment. Who had been preparing for it. Who had been looking forward to it. "George," he said, and my name sounded like a dismissal. "This isn't your home anymore. We've taken care of everything." Behind him, Lisa stood in the shadows like a ghost of the daughter I used to know. She wouldn't look at me. She wouldn't speak. She just stood there, letting her husband destroy the man who had raised her. "But this is my house," I said, and my voice cracked like a boy's. "Not anymore," Mark said. And then he smiled. The smile of a predator who had finally cornered his prey. The door closed. The lock clicked. And I was alone in the darkness, holding a useless key to a life that was no longer mine. I called the police, of course. What else could I do? But when Officer Martinez arrived, he looked at me with pity instead of outrage. Sir, I understand this is difficult, but according to our records, the property at this address is owned by Mark and Lisa Henderson. If you believe there's been some kind of fraud, you'll need to contact a lawyer and file a civil suit. But I built this house, I said. I've lived here for 22 years. I'm sorry, sir. But your name isn't on the current deed. Without proof of ownership, there's nothing we can do. Proof of ownership. How do you prove you own something when all the documents have been changed? How do you prove your life is your own when someone else holds all the papers? I spent that night in my truck in the driveway of my own home. Through the windows, I could see Mark and Lisa moving around inside, rearranging furniture, hanging pictures, making the place theirs. They had left the curtains open on purpose, I think. They wanted me to see. They wanted me to understand that this was final. The next morning, a security guard came and told me I was trespassing. That if I didn't leave immediately, they would call the police and have me arrested. Trespassing. On the land I had bought with my own money. In front of the house I had built with my own hands. I drove to a motel and checked into a room that smelled like disinfectant and despair. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall and tried to understand how my life had come to this. How the people I loved most in the world had managed to steal everything from me while I was looking the other way. But I wasn't crying. I was planning. You see, Mark and Lisa made one crucial mistake in their careful campaign to destroy my life. They assumed I was just a foolish old man who built houses for a living. They assumed I didn't understand technology or legal documents or modern security systems. They were wrong. 3 years ago, after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood, I had installed a comprehensive security system in my house. Not just cameras and alarms, but cloud-based digital storage that automatically uploaded footage to secure servers. I set up the system myself, learned how to access it remotely, even programmed it to send alerts to my phone when motion was detected. Mark and Lisa knew about the cameras, of course. They had seen them mounted around the house. But they assumed the old man who installed them didn't really understand how they worked. They assumed I would be too confused or intimidated to actually use the system against them. They were very, very wrong. From my motel room, I logged into the security system using my phone. The login still worked, they hadn't thought to change the passwords. And what I found, there was a treasure trove of evidence that would have made any prosecutor weep with joy. Hours and hours of footage showing Mark and Lisa in my house when I wasn't there. Going through my mail. Moving my belongings. Making phone calls to lawyers and real estate agents. And most damning of all, a conversation they had in my living room 2 weeks before I returned from Phoenix. I watched my daughter and her husband sit on my couch, the couch Sarah had picked out, the couch where I had read bedtime stories to Lisa when she was small, and plan my destruction. He won't be able to prove anything, Mark said. All the documents show us as the owners. His signature is on everything. What if he gets a lawyer? Lisa asked. With what money? We control his accounts now. And even if he finds some ambulance chaser to take the case, it'll take years to sort out. By then, we'll have sold the place and moved on. I feel bad about this, Lisa said, but her voice was flat. Mechanical. Like she was reading lines from a script. Don't, Mark replied. He's old. He was going to lose the house eventually anyway, either to medical bills or nursing home costs. We're just being practical. Besides, he'll be happier in assisted living. He won't have to worry about maintenance or property taxes or any of that stuff. And the money from the sale? Will give us a fresh start. Maybe we can finally afford that house in the suburbs you wanted. The one with the good school district. They were selling my house. They were using the money to buy their dream home. They were planning to stick me in some institution and live off the proceeds of my life's work. I saved every second of that conversation. I downloaded hours of additional footage showing them forging documents, intercepting my mail, and meeting with real estate agents. I had enough evidence to send them both to prison for fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. But I wanted more than justice. I wanted revenge. The next day, I called my old friend Detective Harris. We had worked together on several construction projects over the years. I had built his deck, he had helped me navigate some permit issues. He was a good man, honest and thorough, and when I explained my situation, he was furious. "Jesus, George, why didn't you call me sooner? This is elder abuse, fraud, forgery, we're talking serious felony charges here. I want to do this right," I told him. "I want to make sure they can't wiggle out of it on some technicality." Harris put me in touch with a lawyer who specialized in elder abuse cases. Patricia Chen was sharp as a razor and twice as cutting when she got angry. When I showed her the security footage, her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Mr. Henderson, this is the most clear-cut case of financial elder abuse I've seen in 20 years. We have them dead to rights." But I had a different plan in mind. Something more poetic. Something that would give them exactly what they had given me, a slow, creeping realization that everything they thought they had was slipping away. "I don't want to just have them arrested," I told Chen. "I want them to feel what I felt. I want them to watch their world fall apart piece by piece." Chen smiled. It was not a kind smile. For the next 2 weeks, I played the part of the defeated old man. I called Lisa and left tearful voicemails begging for forgiveness, asking if we could work something out. I showed up at their rental house with flowers and apologies, acting confused and desperate. Mark ate it up. He loved seeing me grovel. He loved knowing that he had won and I had lost. When I suggested that maybe we could meet for dinner to discuss signing the house over officially, he practically salivated. "That's very mature of you, George," he said, like he was talking to a child who had finally learned to behave. "I think that would be best for everyone." I insisted on cooking dinner myself, in my own kitchen. "One last meal in the old place," I said. "For old time's sake." They agreed, of course. They couldn't resist the opportunity to gloat. They couldn't resist the chance to eat my food in my house while I signed away my life. The dinner was set for a Saturday evening. I spent all day preparing, but not just the food. I was preparing for war. I arrived at the house, my house, 2 hours early. The new digital lock still recognized my fingerprint. They had been too lazy to reprogram that part of the system. I let myself in and went to work. First, I reactivated all the security cameras they had disabled. Then I placed several additional recording devices around the dining room and kitchen. I hid wireless microphones in the flower arrangement on the table and inside the salt and pepper shakers. By the time I was finished, every word spoken in that room would be captured from multiple angles and stored in 3 different cloud services. Then I started cooking. Pot roast with carrots and potatoes, just like Sarah used to make. Mashed potatoes with real butter. Green beans from the garden I had planted behind the house. Apple pie for dessert, using Sarah's mother's recipe. I wanted their last meal in my house to be perfect. Mark and Lisa arrived at 6:30, fashionably late as always. They walked into my house like they owned the place, which, according to the forged documents, they did. Mark was wearing an expensive suit and a satisfied smile. Lisa looked nervous, but she was trying to hide it. "George, this smells amazing," Mark said, giving me a condescending pat on the shoulder. "Just like old times." We sat down at the dining room table, the new, modern table they had bought to replace Sarah's antique, and I served the meal I had prepared. For 40 minutes, we made small talk. Mark told me about his work, his plans for the future, his ideas about modernizing the property. Lisa picked at her food and avoided eye contact. And all the while, hidden microphones captured every word. As we ate dessert, I began the performance of my life. "Mark, Lisa, I want you to know how sorry I am about the way I've been acting," I said, letting my voice shake just a little. "I know you're just trying to help me, and I've been stubborn and ungrateful." "That's okay, George," Mark said magnanimously. "We understand this is a difficult transition for you. I've been thinking about what you said, about assisted living and simplifying my life," I continued. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it is time for me to let go of this old place." Lisa looked up from her pie, surprise flickering across her face. This wasn't the conversation she had expected. "I want to sign the house over to you officially," I said. "No more lawyers, no more legal complications. I want this to be clean and simple." Mark's eyes lit up. This was the moment he had been waiting for. "That's very wise, George. I think you'll find that once the paperwork is settled, you'll feel much more at peace." "I just have one request," I said. "I'd like to record a little video message. For the family records, you know. Something to explain why I'm making this decision, so future generations understand that this was my choice." Mark agreed immediately. He probably thought it would be useful evidence if anyone ever questioned the legitimacy of the transfer. I set up my phone on the table, hit record, and began to speak. "My name is George Henderson, and today is October 28, 2025. I want everyone to know that I am transferring ownership of my home to my daughter Lisa and her husband Mark of my own free will. No one is forcing me to do this." Mark was nodding approvingly. Lisa was staring at her hands. "I want to explain why I'm making this decision," I continued. "For the past year, Mark and Lisa have been helping me manage my affairs. They've been taking care of my bills, my mail, my bank accounts, really going above and beyond to make sure I'm taken care of in my old age." "That's right," Mark interjected. "We just want what's best for you, George." "Mark has been especially helpful," I continued. "He's handled so many things for me. Property taxes, insurance payments, even setting up new bank accounts to make everything more efficient." Mark was practically glowing. In his mind, I was giving him a glowing testimonial that would cover his tracks and legitimize his theft. But then I dropped the hammer. "Of course, it was very thoughtful of Mark to forge my signature on all those documents," I said, my voice still calm and conversational. "And setting up that shell company to funnel my money through, that was brilliant. Very creative." Mark's face went white. Lisa looked up sharply. "I particularly appreciated the way you changed the locks while I was visiting my brother," I continued. "That was a nice touch. Really drove home the point that this wasn't my home anymore." "George, what are you?" Mark started, but I held up my hand. "Oh, and the security cameras you thought you disabled? They were still recording. Cloud storage is a wonderful thing, don't you think? I have hours of footage of you two planning this whole scheme. Every conversation, every forged document, every stolen dollar, it's all there." The color drained from Lisa's face. Mark looked like he was going to be sick. "You see, Mark, you made one crucial mistake in your little plan," I said, standing up from the table. "You assumed I was just a dumb old man who wouldn't fight back. You thought you could steal my life and I would just accept it." I walked over to the living room and turned on the television. With a few clicks of the remote, the screen filled with security footage, Mark and Lisa in my house, going through my papers, laughing about how easy it had been to fool the old man. "You stole my home, my peace, and my trust," I said, my voice rising now with all the anger and pain I had been holding back. "Now, I'm taking back everything, including my name." Mark jumped up from his chair, his face twisted with rage and panic. "You can't prove anything. Those recordings were made without our consent. They're not admissible in court." I smiled. The first genuine smile I had felt in months. "Actually, Mark, this is my house. I have every right to record what happens in my own home. And besides, you just confessed to everything on camera 5 minutes ago, with your full knowledge and consent. The doorbell rang. Perfect timing. Oh, that would be Detective Harris and his friends from the district attorney's office, I said. I invited them for dessert. Mark's face went through a series of expressions: disbelief, rage, fear, and finally, a kind of broken desperation that I recognized from my own reflection in the motel room mirror. Lisa, tell him this is all a misunderstanding, he pleaded, turning to my daughter. Tell him we were just trying to help. But Lisa wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking at me, and for the first time in months, I saw something familiar in her eyes. Something that looked like the daughter I had raised. Daddy, she whispered, and her voice was small and broken. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. The police took Mark away in handcuffs. As they read him his rights in my living room, he kept protesting his innocence, insisting that this was all a big misunderstanding, that he had only been trying to help his elderly father-in-law. Nobody believed him. Lisa wasn't arrested that night. Her lawyer would work out a plea deal later, but she was questioned for hours. The last I saw of her, she was sitting in the back of a police car, staring at the house she had helped steal from me. The legal proceedings took 6 months. 6 months of depositions and hearings and plea negotiations. Mark was eventually sentenced to 5 years in prison for elder abuse, fraud, and forgery. Lisa got 2 years of probation and 500 hours of community service in exchange for her testimony against her husband. The house was returned to me, of course. All the forged documents were voided, all the stolen money was recovered with interest. I was officially, legally, completely vindicated. But the victory felt hollow. I had my house back, but I had lost my family. I had my name on the deed again, but the home itself felt poisoned by what had happened there. Every room held memories of their betrayal. The kitchen where they had planned my destruction. The living room where they had laughed about my gullibility. The bedroom where I now slept alone, knowing that my own daughter had been willing to throw me away for the promise of a better life. I couldn't live there anymore. The house I had built with love had become a monument to hate. So I sold it. Put it on the market and sold it to a young couple with 2 small children who promised to love it the way Sarah and I had loved it. They were building their own memories now, their own family story, their own dreams for the future. With the money from the sale, I bought a small cabin by the lake where Sarah and I used to go fishing when we were young. It's simple and peaceful, with a view of the water and room for a garden. I sit on the porch in the evenings and watch the sunset paint the water gold, and sometimes I can almost feel Sarah sitting beside me. Lisa writes me letters now. Long, tearful letters full of apologies and explanations and promises to make things right. She's in therapy, she says. She's getting divorced from Mark. She wants to rebuild our relationship, to earn back my trust, to be my daughter again. I read every letter. I keep them in a box by my bed. But I haven't answered them yet. Forgiveness is a complicated thing. It doesn't mean forgetting what someone did to you. It doesn't mean pretending that betrayal didn't happen. It means deciding that the person who hurt you deserves a chance to be better than they were. I'm still deciding if Lisa deserves that chance. But I'm not bitter anymore. I'm not consumed with rage or pain or the need for revenge. Justice was served. The truth came out. The people who stole from me paid the price for their greed. And in the end, I learned something important. Home isn't a building or a deed or a collection of possessions. Home is the people who love you unconditionally, who would never dream of betraying your trust, who see you as more than just an obstacle to their own happiness. I may have lost my house, but I found my strength. I may have lost my daughter, but I kept my dignity. I may be old, but I'm not weak. I may be alone, but I'm not defeated. Because in the end, you can change the locks, but you can't lock out justice. And if you believe no one is ever too old to fight back, if you believe that trust is sacred and family means something more than convenience, if you believe that good people can win against bad people when they refuse to give up, then you understand why I'm telling you this story. Not for sympathy. Not for pity. But as a reminder that sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one everyone thinks is weak. Sometimes the smartest person at the table is the one everyone thinks is foolish. And sometimes the most dangerous opponent you'll ever face is the one you've underestimated. They thought I was just a broken old man grieving his wife and losing his mind. They had no idea who they were dealing with. My name is George Henderson. I'm 69 years old. And this is the story of how I fought back and won.